My name is Darshan, and I'm going to talk to you about visuals. Linda talked about a lot of the content, and I think what I'm going to hopefully convey to you is that pairing up the visuals will make a big difference in your presentation. When I talk about visuals in our society, are there any images or thoughts that come to your mind?
Ads.
Ads? Yep. Anything else? Everyone's enjoying the pizza.
Powerful.
Powerful, yeah. Any particular kind of images that come to your mind?
Charts.
Charts? Okay. Ads is probably good. I mean, when I say society very picture-oriented, a lot of people think of television, mobile devices, ads, logos. And the point I'm trying to make is you want to use the old adage, a picture is worth 1,000 words, to your advantage. Because you can convey a lot of things very quickly, easily, with good visuals in your presentation. And that's what you want to take advantage of. Because you're going to have limited time, and you want to do everything you can to give yourself the advantages. So come up with a really good visual that matches the content you're doing, and then you don't have to say a lot of things yourself. The audience will bring those thoughts, those images, and those words to them that you want them to. We can assimilate a tremendous amount of information very quickly. If you really think about it, going back to ads, ads are 30 seconds. I mean, now they've done it down to 15 seconds. And in the Super Bowl, they were doing 1 second ads, if you remember, a year ago. It's amazing what you can get down to 30 seconds, right? And they're using everything at their disposal. They're using emotion, they're using music, they're using storytelling. They're also repeating several times, even in 30 seconds. So you might think, I don't have enough time in 20 minutes. Let's think a lot of things they get accomplished in 30 seconds. And they do that with really good visuals, and they know that people can process things very, very quickly. So use that to your advantage. And you know, after a while you'll find that a lot of times business presentations, and especially with PowerPoint and so on, your eyes just start glazing over and they just kind of they numb you. So you should do whatever you can to make it interesting. And I'm going to give you some examples. It's not just visuals and PowerPoints. There's other ways to think of visuals, and I think you all should think about ways to do that, to make it interesting and engaging. And I think you really set yourself apart when you do that. 3M did a study, and they found that meetings tend to be shorter, more productive when you have visuals. And there's one thing all of us here have in common. I can see we have people from many nationalities and backgrounds. There's one thing we all have in common. That is we all have limited time. And whatever you can do to convey a lot of information in a short amount of time, you'll be better for it, and your audience really will appreciate it because they're also with limited time. And good visuals, good content will help you be more professional. And the other thing also will do, working with visuals takes time. It's not easy because you really have to make it simple, short, concise, and visually appealing. And to do that takes time. But the good news is you become better prepared with the content. And that's probably half the battle. As Linda talked about earlier, I would absolutely not use notes up here at all. You don't need them. You should have good visuals that if you look at what you're saying, you know what the points are, and then that's what you're going to make come alive. Make the points come alive with stories and things like that. But that's going to allow you to connect with the audience. But it's working with visuals will help you become better prepared. And that's what's going to give you the confidence when you get up here saying, I'm prepared to talk about this and to do this. That's why it's good to spend some time with your visuals. How many of you like to sell? I see like 3 half hands. What are we doing here? What is this? What are we doing in this competition here? What are you doing? Selling what?
Yourself.
Who said yourself? You know that. Yeah, you're selling your ideas for sure, but ultimately you're selling yourself. And the point I'm trying to make is, I know sell is a 4-letter word, but it doesn't have to be the used car salesman. It's funny, Linda talked about this one time. Did you say that? You know, talking about used car salesman, and the guy gets up and says, but I am a used car salesman. But what we're talking about is when you come up here, you should have a purpose. And that purpose is probably going to be to persuade, to convince, to influence. You're gonna want to reach an objective. But if you come up here to say, I just want to be informative, you're not going to be that effective. So come up here with an objective for your audience and let them know what that objective is. Because once they know it and then they know what you're up here for, they'll give you the time to let you achieve that objective. But don't come up here and just say, I want to be informative, and if they get it, they might choose me. Come up here with really an objective. It'll give you the confidence and the professionalism and the credibility that you need when you're up here. And so, good visuals with good presentations will help you be more persuasive, more credible. And again, we talked about making it interesting. Do whatever you can to make it interesting. People remember about 10% of what they read, about 20% of what they hear, about 30% of what they see, and you can probably increase about 50% when you combine with what they see and they hear. So the point of this is that people are going to remember probably about half of what you tell them. So you definitely have to do some repetition, but more than anything, a lot of people remember more when you show them something and tell them at the same time. This is where most teams make mistakes. A lot of times they're saying one thing, showing something else. And when there's a disconnect between what you're saying and what you're showing, people say, wait a minute, they're saying one thing, they start going back and forth. And they might do it once or twice, maybe 3 times. But if you make them work, what they're going to do is they're going to say, they're going to go to all these other competing thoughts. It's raining outside. Oh, it's going to be really pouring. I forgot my umbrella. What am I going to have for dinner tonight? Oh, I need to call. All these competing thoughts are going to come in whenever you make them work to listen to you or to see what you're showing them. So you want to absolutely make sure what you're saying and what you're showing sync up. And it's a huge problem I run with a lot of teams. You just need to make sure that there's total synchronicity between the two. It'll make it much easier so the audience can go back and forth what you're showing, what you're saying, seamlessly without having to lose a connection with you. There are all types of visuals. I mean, most of you are going to be using PowerPoint, or if you're on a Mac, you're going to be using Keynote. They're all great tools, software. You can use motion and stuff. I'll come back to what you're talking about with the media. But there's other ways you can also do a visual. I want you all to close your eyes for a second. Close your eyes. I want you to imagine yourself on the beach in Bermuda. You just got out of all the snow in D.C. You're on the beach, and you can just feel the warmth of the sun racing across the water, slowly hitting your toes, and you can just feel the warmth coming up from your toes, up your leg, up to your face. And it's a new day with bright sunshine. All right, wake up. This is the hard part, getting you to wake up. But I bet you, all of you had a much better view of the ocean and the sun than I could have probably created up here. So what I'm trying to tell you is don't be tied to just these electronic visuals. Use the board. If you're getting interactive with the judges, use the board. Use everything at your disposal to have good visuals. And don't think about only one way of doing it. Think of creative ways to make it interesting and engaging. And there's lots of things you can do, and I think you'll see some really interesting things when the actual competition takes place. So, in each visual has its pros and cons associated with it. So what you want to do is tap into the benefits of each medium you're going to use to your advantage. What visuals can and can't do for you. What's your most important visual? Absolutely you. A lot of times people that are nervous or they feel like they can't present, they rely on the presentation visuals to do all the work. So they're just there kind of saying, okay, I'm going to read the slides, I'm going to go to the next one. But they want the visuals to carry the day. Don't do that. Visuals can help you reach your objective. They can help you be well organized. But you don't want to use them to control the pace of the presentation, and it's certainly not going to make you a better presenter. If anything, they're there to enhance you. They're not there to replace you. You are your number one visual. They're up there to listen to you. If they weren't, you could have just sent them the slide deck, right? And just let them read that. And they can just make a decision based on that. But that's there to help you, support you, enhance you. But it's you that they want to listen to. It's you they want to connect with. And it's you they're ultimately going to make a decision about. Now, I'll say half the battle in business is really getting people to like you. It's not whether you have the best idea or the smartest person in the room. They're often saying, can I do business with these people? Can I really work with them? Do I feel like I can get along with them and work with them? And sometimes it's somebody might not even have the best answer or the right answer. You just say, I just really like them. I think I can work with them. I can figure out a way to make it happen. So remember that. Like Linda talked about, half the battle is likability and getting them to like you. And Make sure you want to connect as much as possible with your audience and have the visuals there just to support you. These are some really basic rules, and I'll tell you, this is probably the most difficult one to do. And this is because you're probably an expert with your product or service. You've been eating, breathing this for probably a long time, and you probably forgot what it's like to be a beginner or someone that didn't know about this at the very, I mean, you've probably seen it with professors, right? They're really experts in their field, they're up here, and you're coming into the field. So you need to get back to a level where you can relate to them, they can understand, but you want to bring them up to your level of expertise in a very systematic, personal kind of way. And that's where it requires you basically getting out of your shoes as an expert and stepping into the shoes of the audience and asking yourself, what are some concerns, what are some issues, what are things that they might be having that to me seem like, I've already addressed those are long behind me. But that's what you need to do. You need to put yourself in the shoes of your audience and really define for them what it is you're solving or what it is you're doing. All of you have products, right? Products and services. Chances are your product or service is going to address a problem, right? And chances are that's probably a great time for you to make that problem come alive. I mean, probably most of you face this problem, and you said, here's a solution, and I'm going to create a product or service around this. So that's a great opportunity for you to connect with the audience and say, let me really define the problem for them. Let me give them my personal story or the story of whatever that really led you, that inspired you to really find and identify this problem, and then how you're going to go about solving it. So think of ways like that to connect, to come up with examples and stories to make it really come alive. And you might think, that's silly. I just want to talk about my product. This is great, wonderful. Again, bring people up to your level of expertise by getting them to connect with the original problem you had in the very beginning. Strive to enhance each point, but try not to have too many points throughout. Less is more. People can't retain that much information. It just gets to be too overwhelming. Now, obviously, you need to cover a fair amount of things in your presentation, but you need to do it in a manner that there's a flow, there's some pauses, some gaps so people can absorb it, think about it, and you need it as well as presenters. I think one of the reasons a lot of times people have ums and ahs is because they feel when they're up here they have to talk the entire time. That's not true. You need some pauses to take a breath. The audience needs it to absorb things. But strive to enhance each point on each visual, but try not to inundate them too much because then they can't keep track of all of it. So have a certain flow and pace to your presentation. Try to maintain a consistent format with your visuals and so on, as well as maybe with presenters, so that they can identify. Because you're going to have how many teams here? Are there, John?
10.
10. I mean, after a while, they start blending in the minds of the judges. They can't quite remember it all. So you want to clearly come up with an identity for your team through your name, your visuals, so that they clearly identify you and that you stand out. That's why companies have logos and they have certain fonts they use, things like that, that really identify them. You're going to have to do the same thing. And you want to use readable, consistent typeface. We're not here to see how creative you are with fonts or how creative you are with art or being able to find the greatest fantastic picture. That's not your goal here. Your goal here is to make sure people can read what you put up there as well as understand the pictures. That's your goal. We had a person who decided to do a globe in their presentation. This was something. This is when GIFs or animation was really getting big, and so they spent an entire week on this globe because it just wanted a spinning perfect rate at its perfect angle. Of course, they lost all that week working on the content of the presentation. So what happens when the presentation comes? The globe crashes the entire presentation, and it never worked. And the team was about to kill him because it was so resource intensive. The presentation just totally died, and then you go to another computer. So again, use your time wisely. Just keep your focus. Your focus here is to connect with the audience, sell your product or service, and convince them that this is a viable business that's going to do what? What's it going to do? Make money, exactly. That's what you want to convince them. So you don't want to necessarily show how great you are at fonts or PowerPoint or a keynote. And try to use easy to remember points and so on and so forth. And absolutely check spelling in your visuals. You know, it's one of those things when you work with something a long time, you know, you gloss over things. That happens to me. So there's two tricks. One, get someone else to look at it that hasn't been that familiar with the material. But two, look at your material backwards, not the same way you always used to. Do it a different way, and maybe you'll catch it. It's not just spelling. Don't totally rely on spell checkers in your programs, because you can have the right spelling but the wrong word. So be careful of that. This one really doesn't apply to you guys anymore, because we used to have this competition done a different way. But basically, if you have a choice between landscape and portrait, almost all you're going to be doing this because you're using PowerPoint and Keynote. It allows you to avoid lists. If you use this format, you end up having big, long lists. Whereas with the other format, you tend to have shorter lists, but you have room for an image next to it. And you can alternate it, and that's what maybe makes it more effective for visuals in your presentation. Here's kind of a rule of 6. Again, this is not a hard rule, but just kind of if you can use this as a guideline, I think it will really help you. Try to have no more than 6 words per line. The worst thing I've seen, people get up here and they have all this wording all over the slide that fills it from one corner to the other. And they say it's all important, I'm going to cover all of it. And the audience looks at it thinking, oh my God, how long is this going to take? And I'm going to have, so they'll say, I'll listen to maybe the first 2 points, and I'm out of here until I come back to the end of the slide. And you don't want that to happen. So limit it to 6 words per line. Try to have no more than 6 lines per graphic. And really avoid overcrowding. White space is just as important as the content on the page. And again, with fonts, we talked about it. I try to avoid italics and capitals and so on. And really, I really would use simple fonts, because a lot of times you'll end up having a fancy font on your computer, you can hook it up here, and they don't have that font on this computer. And it's going to really mess up the alignment and your presentation. So I'd stick with the standards, Helvetica, Arial, things like that you know. And if you really need a special font, make sure you bring it and install it and check it on the computer before you do it. Question?
One cheat that I do is I screen capture it and I drop it in as like a JPEG.
You can do that as well.
I want my pretty fonts.
Right. That's okay. You can do that.
Yeah.
And if you found tricks to do that, that's great. But sometimes you can run into issues where it's still not the right hue or color. Because some of these projectors, they vary. So I try to keep it simple. I might even have multiple backups and stuff like that. But just recognize the fonts you use on your computer may not always be the fonts that are on the computers you have access to. And really maintain a sharp contrast. If you're going to use dark letters, use a very light background, and vice versa. And a lot of people make a mistake there as well. And again, sometimes the way it looks on your computer and the way it looks on the projection screen can be very, very different. So when in doubt, try to maintain as much of a contrast as possible. I would really try to include one idea per visual. Here's an example of basically taking a simple idea and using arithmetic to make it simple. Like here's a concept: lack of sufficient staff members on a project is leading